The message arrived at 3 in the morning, Earth time. Sarah Chen was still awake in her small office above the noodle shop in New Mumbai's legal district. She was reviewing a simple trade dispute between a human merchant and a Rigelian supplier when her secure terminal beeped with an encrypted file. Sarah almost deleted it. She got dozens of spam messages every day from beings claiming they needed help with impossible cases. But something about this one made her pause. The encryption was old, almost ancient by galactic standards. It had been passed through so many hands that tracking its origin would be impossible. She opened it. The images hit her like a punch to the stomach. Hundreds of crystalline beings, their bodies glowing with soft inner light, were chained to massive mining machines. Their natural ability to process rare minerals was being used against them. The crystals that grew from their bodies were being harvested while they were still alive. Their faces, though alien, showed unmistakable pain. "My name is Bright Echo," the message read. "I am one of the last free luminary. My people are being destroyed by the Korvath mining conglomerate. Their CEO, Zexatheta the Eternal, has turned our entire species into mining equipment. We have tried everything. No lawyer in the galaxy will take our case. You are our last hope." Sarah leaned back in her worn office chair. She knew about Korvath. Everyone did. They controlled 30% of the galaxy's mineral trade. Their CEO, Zexatheta, was a Valorian who had lived for over 300 years. He had never lost a legal battle. His lawyers were the best money could buy, and those he couldn't buy he destroyed. The smart thing would be to delete the message and forget she ever saw it. Sarah was nobody special. She had graduated from Earth's Mumbai Law School just 5 years ago. Her biggest case so far had been helping a human colonist get compensation for a faulty spaceship. She had 12 clients, maybe 13 on a good month. Her office was so small she could touch both walls if she stretched out her arms, but she couldn't stop looking at those images. One showed a young luminary, barely out of childhood, connected to a machine that was slowly draining the crystals from their body. The machine's readout showed it had been running for 6 months straight. Sarah's hands moved to her keyboard before she could stop herself. She started researching Korvath, Zexatheta, and the Luminari. 4 hours later, as the sun rose over New Mumbai, she had filled 3 data pads with notes. The Luminari were from a small planet on the edge of Council space. They were peaceful beings who had only developed space travel 50 years ago. Around the same time, humans joined the Galactic Council. Their bodies naturally produced a crystal called luminium, which was essential for faster-than-light communication. A single luminari could produce maybe a gram of luminium in a year through their natural life cycle. But Korvath had found a way to force the process, extracting 10 times that amount in months. The process was killing them. The legal situation was even worse than Sarah had imagined. Galactic law was built on precedent and power. The older species, the ones who had been traveling the stars for millennia, had written laws that protected the powerful and ignored the weak. There were no real protections for younger species. Technically, what Korvath was doing wasn't even illegal. They had gotten the Luminari to sign contracts, even if those contracts were signed under threat of death. Sarah's communication terminal chimed. It was her landlord, Mr. Patel, who owned the noodle shop below. "Sarah, you have visitors," his voice said through the speaker. He sounded nervous. Sarah looked at her security screen. 3 beings stood in the shop. 2 were Rigorians, 7 feet tall with gray skin and 4 arms. They wore the expensive suits of corporate lawyers. The 3rd was smaller, hidden under a hooded cloak. She knew she should be afraid, but mostly she felt angry. They were trying to intimidate her before she had even taken the case. Sarah walked down to the shop. The few customers who had been eating breakfast had left, leaving only Mr. Patel behind his counter, trying to look busy while obviously terrified. "Ms. Chen," one of the Rigorians said. His voice sounded like grinding stone. "I am Thux, Senior Legal Counsel for Korvath Mining. We understand you received a communication today." "I receive lots of communications," Sarah said. She poured herself a cup of coffee from Mr. Patel's pot, taking her time. "You'll have to be more specific. Don't play games, human," the other Rigorian said. "You know why we're here." Sarah took a sip of coffee. "Actually, I don't. Unless you're here to order some noodles, you're trespassing in Mr. Patel's establishment." The hooded figure stepped forward and pulled back their hood. Sarah's breath caught. It was Zexatheta himself. She had seen images of him, but in person he was even more imposing. His species, the Valorians, looked like someone had carved a warrior out of obsidian. His forearms ended in hands that could crush stone. His eyes were red like old blood. "Ms. Chen," Zex Theta said. His voice was surprisingly smooth, almost pleasant. "I came here personally because I respect what your species has accomplished. In only 50 years, humans have spread across 40 systems. You're fighters, survivors, I admire that." He moved closer. Sarah didn't step back. "But you're also young," he continued. "You don't understand how things work in the galaxy. The Luminari situation is unfortunate, but it's a matter of contracts and business. They signed agreements. They're being compensated." "Compensated?" Sarah set down her coffee cup harder than necessary. "I saw the images. You're killing them." "We're employing them," Thux corrected. "Everything we do is legal under Galactic Corporate Code." "Legal doesn't mean right," Sarah said. Zexa Theta laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass. Spoken like a true human. "Your species still believes in concepts like right and wrong. How charming. How naive." He pulled out a credit chip and placed it on the counter. "That contains more money than you'll see in your lifetime. Take it, forget the message. Continue with your small practice and your small cases. Live comfortably." Sarah looked at the chip. It probably did contain enough money to set her up for life. She could buy a real office, hire assistants, take the cases she wanted instead of the ones she needed. She picked up the chip, examined it, then handed it back to Zex Theta. "No," she said. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Thux's 4 hands clenched into fists. "You're making a mistake, human," Zex Theta said. His pleasant tone was gone. "I've destroyed beings far more powerful than you. I've bought judges, ruined planets, eliminated entire bloodlines. You're nothing. A speck. An insect, maybe," Sarah said. "But insects can be pretty annoying. Ask anyone who's dealt with Earth mosquitoes." Zexus Theta stared at her for a long moment. "If you take this case, I will destroy everything you've ever built. Your practice, your reputation, your life. I will make you an example of what happens when lesser beings forget their place." Sarah smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile her grandfather had worn when he talked about fighting for workers' rights in the old Earth factories, before humanity reached the stars. "Mr. Zexa Theta," she said. "Get out of my neighborhood." The Valorian's eyes flared brighter. For a moment, Sarah thought he might attack her right there. Then he turned and walked out, his lawyers following. When they were gone, Mr. Patel emerged from behind his counter. "Sarah, what have you done?" Sarah picked up her coffee and drained it. "I'm going to need a lot more of this coffee, Mr. Patel. And maybe you should close the shop for a few days. Take a vacation." She went back to her office and opened a new case file. At the top, she typed, "The people of Luminar versus Korvath Mining Conglomerate." Then she sent a message to Bright Echo. "I'll take your case." Within an hour, her office building's owner called to say her lease was terminated. Within 2 hours, her bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. Within 3 hours, her law license was being challenged by the Mumbai Bar Association. Sarah had expected all of it. She had already moved her important files to secure storage. She had opened accounts under her grandmother's maiden name. She had sent copies of everything to journalists on 15 different worlds. The war had begun. Zexa Theta had all the power, all the money, all the advantages. But Sarah had something he didn't understand, something uniquely human. She had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. She made one more call. This one to an old law school friend who worked at the Galactic Court. "Hey, Raj." "It's Sarah. I need you to file something for me." "Yes, I know what time it is. Just listen. I want to file a case in Galactic High Court. Yes, the High Court. Stop laughing and listen. The defendant is Korvath Mining." "Yes, that Korvath. I'm invoking Section 7 of the Human Galactic Trade Agreement, the one that allows Earth law to apply in certain circumstances. Nobody's ever used it before because nobody's been crazy enough to try." She paused, listening to her friend's protests. "I know it's insane. That's why it might work." Centaurus Station floated in space like a massive metal flower, its petals stretching out for hundreds of kilometers. It was the seat of the Galactic High Court, where the most important legal battles in known space were fought. Sarah had seen it in videos, but standing in the docking bay, looking up at the impossibly high ceilings, she felt very small. She pulled her single suitcase behind her. Everything she owned was in that case. Zexa Theta's lawyers had been thorough. Her apartment had been condemned. Her office had been demolished for safety violations. Even her favorite coffee shop had been shut down after a mysterious health inspection. But Sarah was still here, still fighting. The court building itself was designed to accommodate every species in the Galactic Council. Different sections had different atmospheres, different gravity levels, different temperatures. Sarah's human section was thankfully close to Earth normal, though the air smelled like recycled plastic. She found her assigned quarters, a small room with a bed, a desk, and a terminal. It was supposed to be temporary housing for visiting lawyers, but it would be her home for the duration of the trial. On the desk was a package. Inside was a new suit, clearly expensive, with a note. "You'll need to look the part. A friend." Sarah didn't recognize the handwriting, but she wasn't in a position to refuse help. The next morning, she stood in courtroom 7, the second largest courtroom on the station. The ceiling was 50 meters high to accommodate the flying species. The judge's bench could adjust to different sizes. The gallery held thousands of seats. Right now, those seats were mostly empty. Only a few dozen beings had come to watch what everyone assumed would be a quick dismissal. Zexa Theta's legal team took up an entire section. 15 Rigorian lawyers, their minds linked telepathically so they could coordinate perfectly. Behind them sat researchers, assistants, and experts from a dozen species. Their table was covered with advanced legal terminals and holographic displays. Sarah had a basic datapad and a cup of coffee she had made in her room. The judge entered. Judge Cuzzet was an Etherian, a being of pure energy contained in a humanoid field. They were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, and their age showed in the slow, deliberate way they moved. "Case number 7749 Alpha." The judge's voice resonated directly in everyone's minds. "The people of Luminar versus Korvath Mining Conglomerate. I see we have a unusual situation. Ms. Chen, you're invoking Earth legal precedent in a galactic high court?" Sarah stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Under Section 7 of the Human Galactic Trade Agreement, Earth citizens defending allied species can request Earth legal procedures be applied." The lead Rigorian lawyer, Thux, stood with all 4 arms spread. "This is absurd, Your Honor. That clause was meant for small trade disputes, not major corporate litigation." "The clause doesn't specify the size of the case," Sarah countered. "It simply says legal disputes involving Earth citizens and allied species. The Luminari are allied with Earth through the Mutual Defense Treaty of 2387. Judge Cuzzet flickered. Their energy formed shifting colors. It was how Etherians showed they were thinking. "I've reviewed the relevant documents. The human's interpretation is creative but technically correct. I'll allow Earth procedures. But Ms. Chen, you should know that creativity alone won't win this case." "I understand, Your Honor. My first motion is for full discovery." The gallery, small as it was, erupted in whispers. Thux's 4 hands all clenched at once. "Your Honor, this is harassment. Discovery is not part of galactic legal tradition." "But it is part of Earth legal tradition," Sarah said. "I'm requesting all documents, communications, and records related to Korvath's operations on Luminar for the past 10 years. That would be millions of documents." Another Rigorian lawyer protested. "Then you'd better start gathering them," Sarah said. She pulled out a thick paper document, actual paper which most species hadn't used in centuries. "This is my discovery request. It's quite specific." Judge Cuzzet took the document with an energy tendril. "This is over 300 pages. 342, Your Honor." I was thorough. The judge's energy form shifted to what Sarah had learned was amusement. "Mr. Thux, you have 30 standard days to comply." "Your Honor, this is impossible." "Your client has extensive resources," the judge noted. "I'm sure they can manage." "Next motion?" Sarah took a breath. This was the big one. "I move to certify this as a class action lawsuit, representing not just the current Luminary workers, but every being harmed by Korvath's operations in the past century." The courtroom went silent. Even the air recyclers seemed to pause. Thux stood slowly. "Your Honor, class action is an Earth concept. It has no standing in galactic law, which is why I'm invoking Earth law," Sarah said. "Your Honor, Korvath has harmed millions of beings across dozens of worlds. They use the same tactics everywhere. Force contracts, exploit local laws, destroy ecosystems. The Luminari are just the latest victims." She pulled up a holographic display from her datapad. It was basic compared to the Rigorians' equipment, but it worked. These are victim statements from 17 different species, all describing similar exploitation by Korvath. How did you get these? Thux demanded, I asked, Sarah said simply. It's amazing what people will tell you if you just ask and actually listen. Judge Kazit reviewed the statements. This is highly irregular, but I find myself curious about this Earth concept of class action. Ms. Chen, you have 1 hour to explain why I should allow this. Sarah had prepared for this. She stood in the center of the courtroom and began to speak. Not in the dry technical language of galactic law, but in the simple, clear words she would use to explain something to her grandmother. Your Honor, the law is supposed to protect everyone, not just the powerful. But when a corporation is as big as Korvath, no single victim can fight them. They get crushed one by one. Class action means victims can stand together. They can share resources, share evidence, share strength. It's not just about efficiency. It's about justice. She pulled up images. Not legal documents, but pictures. A Thrakari whose forest world had been strip-mined. A Benzite whose oceans had been drained for coolant. The Luminari children in the mining machines. Each of these beings has a small claim. Alone, they're nothing to a corporation like Korvath. Together, they're everything, Thux interrupted. Your Honor, this is emotional manipulation, not legal argument. No, Sarah said. It's truth. The Galactic Council was founded on the principle that all sapient beings have rights, but those rights mean nothing if they can't be enforced. Class action is how the small become mighty. Judge Kazit was silent for a long moment. The energy form shifted through colors Sarah had never seen before. I'm going to do something I've never done in 600 years on this bench, the judge finally said. I'm going to allow this Earth procedure. The case is certified as a class action. The small gallery erupted. Thux was shouting objections in 3 languages, but Sarah noticed something else. Her datapad was pinging with messages. Word was spreading across the station. Beings who had been hurt by Korvath were asking to join the case. That night, Sarah worked until her eyes burned. She had received over 1,000 requests to join the class action. She approved them all. She also noticed something interesting in the initial discovery documents Korvath had been forced to send. They were trying to bury her in data, sending millions of irrelevant files. But Sarah had grown up in the information age. She knew how to sort, how to filter, how to find patterns, and she found something. A single communication buried in routine maintenance reports. Zexatheta telling a subordinate to accelerate the Luminar project before the council notices. It wasn't much. But it was a start. A knock at her door interrupted her. She opened it to find a small figure in a hooded cloak. When the hood came back, she saw a Luminari. Their crystalline face was scarred, crystals growing in irregular patterns. I am Bright Echo, they said. I had to come. I had to see the human who would stand for us. Sarah invited them in. Up close, she could see the damage more clearly. Bright Echo had been in the machines. They had escaped but not unchanged. Why? Bright Echo asked. Why help us? We have nothing to offer you. Sarah thought about it. On Earth, there's an old saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. I'm not particularly good, but I can do something. Bright Echo's crystals glowed softly. Zexatheta will try to destroy you. He's already trying, Sarah said, gesturing at her small room. But here's something about humans he doesn't understand. We're stubborn. The more someone tells us we can't do something, the more we want to prove them wrong. She showed Bright Echo what she had found so far. The luminary's light grew brighter as they read. This is more than anyone has ever done for us, Bright Echo said. This is just the beginning, Sarah promised. Tomorrow I'm going to demand depositions, including one from Zexatheta himself. He'll never agree. Sarah smiled. He won't have a choice. Earth law is very clear about that. Sarah had been working for 72 hours straight. The coffee machine in her room had broken twice from overuse. Her eyes felt like sandpaper, and her hands shook from exhaustion and caffeine. But she couldn't stop. Not now. The discovery documents from Korvath had grown from millions to billions. They were trying to drown her in data, making it impossible to find anything useful. But they had made a mistake. They had given her everything, including files they probably didn't mean to include. Sarah had written a simple sorting program, something any first-year Earth law student could code. It looked for patterns, inconsistencies, documents that had been edited multiple times. It was basic by Earth standards, but apparently, no one in the Galactic Court had thought to use automated sorting before. Marcus, The AI she had hired with the last of her savings was helping too. He was an old model, considered obsolete by galactic standards, but he had something newer AIs didn't: creativity born from imperfect programming. "Sarah," Marcus said through the terminal speaker, "I found something interesting. There's a series of deleted files that were partially recovered. They're labeled Project Harvest." Sarah pulled up the files. Most were corrupted, but what remained made her stomach turn. Project Harvest wasn't just about the Luminari. It was a systematic plan to identify species with valuable biological properties and find ways to exploit them. The Luminari were just the test case. "Marcus, can you reconstruct the deleted portions?" "I can try. But Sarah, you need to sleep. Your reaction time is down 40%. You're making mistakes." She wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. She had misspelled defendant in her last filing. 2 hours. Wake me in 2 hours. I'll wake you in 4. Marcus, 4 hours or I'll lock the terminal. Sarah was too tired to argue. She collapsed onto the narrow bed and was asleep in seconds. She woke to urgent beeping. Not from Marcus, but from her door. She opened it to find Bright Echo and 3 other Luminari. They looked terrified. "Sarah, something's happened," Bright Echo said. 17 Luminari witnesses have disappeared. They were supposed to testify tomorrow. Sarah was instantly awake. Disappeared how? Their ships never arrived at the station. No distress signals, no debris. Just gone. Sarah's mind raced. Without witnesses, her case would fall apart. The documents were damning, but galactic law required live testimony for criminal accusations. "Do we have any witnesses still safe?" 5, but they're terrified. "Bring them here. They can stay in my room." "But there's no space." "We'll make space." Sarah was already at her terminal. "Marcus, I need you to file an emergency motion for witness protection." "The Galactic Court doesn't have witness protection," Marcus pointed out. "Then we'll create it. Earth law has it, so under Section 7 we can invoke it." She worked through the night again, this time with 5 Luminari huddled in her room. They told her stories while she typed. Stories about their world before Korvath came, how they used to sing by growing their crystals in harmony, how the children would play in the crystal gardens, how Korvath had promised them wealth and prosperity in exchange for just a little luminium. They came with contracts. One of them, a young Luminari named Soft Chime, said, "We didn't understand them. The translator they used made everything sound reasonable. We didn't know we were signing our lives away." Sarah added this to her notes: fraudulent translation. Another charge to add to the growing list. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the case, and beings from across the galaxy had come to watch. Sarah noticed journalists from a dozen worlds. Their recording devices all pointed at her. Judge Kizit called the court to order. "Ms. Chen, I understand you have an emergency motion?" "Yes, Your Honor. 17 of my witnesses have disappeared. I'm requesting immediate protection for the remaining witnesses and an investigation into what happened." Thuck stood. "Your Honor, Ms. Chen is making unfounded accusations. These witnesses probably just decided not to come. Happens all the time. 17 ships don't just disappear," Sarah shot back. "Your Honor, I'm also requesting all of Korvath's communication logs for the past week." "Objection!" Thuck shouted. "This is a fishing expedition." "This is about witness tampering, which is a serious crime even under galactic law," Sarah said. Judge Kizit considered this. "Mr. Thucks, you will provide the communication logs. Ms. Chen, your remaining witnesses will be placed under court protection." Sarah felt a small victory, but she knew it wasn't enough. She needed something bigger, something that would shake the case wide open. That afternoon, during a break, she was approached by a figure in a maintenance uniform. They pressed something into her hand, a data chip, and disappeared into the crowd before she could say anything. Back in her room, she inserted the chip into her secure terminal. Marcus scanned it for viruses before opening it. It was a video. Sex Theta himself sitting in what looked like a boardroom, speaking to other Valorians. "The Luminary situation is under control," he was saying. "The human lawyer is an annoyance, nothing more. Even if she wins, which she won't, we've already extracted enough luminium to fund our operations for the next decade. And Project Harvest is ready for the next phase. The Aquari's water processing organs will be even more profitable." Sarah watched in horror as Zexa Theta outlined plans for 6 other species, each one targeted for their biological properties, each one to be exploited just like the Luminari. Marcus, is this recording authentic? Running analysis. Yes, no signs of manipulation. The metadata indicates it was recorded 3 days ago in Korvath's headquarters. How did someone get this? Unknown. But Sarah, this is evidence of conspiracy to commit crimes against sapient species. This goes beyond civil litigation. This is criminal. Sarah knew what she had to do. The next morning, she stood before Judge Kest and made a motion that hadn't been made in the Galactic Court in over a century. Your Honor, based on new evidence, I move to convert this from a civil case to a criminal prosecution. The courtroom exploded. Thux was on his feet, all forearms waving. She can't do that. She's not a prosecutor. Under Earth law, Sarah said calmly, any citizen can bring criminal charges if the state fails to act. It's called a private prosecution, and since the Galactic Council has failed to act against Korvath for decades, I'm acting. She played the video. The courtroom fell silent as Zexatheta's voice outlined his plans. When it finished, Sarah could see the shock on every face, even the expressionless Regorians. Your Honor, she continued, I'm charging Zexatheta and the Korvath Board with conspiracy to commit genocide, slavery, and crimes against sapients. Judge Kuzet's energy form was cycling through colors so fast it was almost strobing. This is unprecedented. I need to consult with the full judicial panel. While you do, Sarah said, I'm requesting that Zexatheta be remanded into custody as a flight risk. Zexatheta stood for the first time since the trial began. His red eyes burned with fury. You dare? I am Zexatheta the Eternal. I have resources you can't imagine. I could buy this entire station. Your Honor, Sarah said quietly, he just threatened to buy the court. Security guards, massive beings from the Tauran system, moved to surround Zexatheta. He looked at them with contempt but didn't resist as they placed energy restraints on his forearms. This isn't over, human, he said to Sarah as he was led away. You have no idea what you've started. You're right, Sarah replied. But you have no idea what you've started either. You picked a fight with humanity. We don't give up. Ever. That night, Sarah's room was flooded with messages. Hundreds of beings from dozens of species were offering support. Some sent evidence of Korvath's crimes on their worlds. Others offered to testify. A few even sent small donations to help with her expenses. But the most important message came from Earth. It was from the United Earth Government's Justice Department. Ms. Chen, we've been watching your case with interest. Effective immediately, you're appointed as Special Prosecutor for the United Earth Government. You have our full backing. A team of Earth's best prosecutors is on their way to assist you. Don't let us down. Sarah read the message 3 times. She wasn't alone anymore. Earth was standing behind her. Bright Echo, who had been staying in her room for safety, saw the message. What does this mean? It means, Sarah said, that Zexatheta was right. He has no idea what he started. He attacked the Luminary thinking they were weak and alone, but nobody is alone. That's what he never understood. When you attack one of us, you attack all of us. She looked out the small window at the stars. Somewhere out there, ships from Earth were coming. Not warships, but something Zexatheta feared even more. Lawyers. Hundreds of them. Each one trained in Earth's chaotic, creative legal system. Each one ready to fight. The real battle was about to begin. The Earth legal team arrived like a force of nature. 50 prosecutors, each specialized in different areas of law, took over an entire section of Centaurus Station. They brought with them something the Galactic Court had never seen before, a key, mobile legal library containing every case ever tried on Earth, from ancient Roman law to the latest colonial disputes. Sarah stood in the converted conference room that was now their war room. The walls were covered with evidence boards, timelines, and witness statements. It looked like chaos to anyone else, but to the human lawyers, it was beautiful organization. All right, everyone, said lead prosecutor James Morrison, a gray-haired man who had successfully prosecuted 3 interplanetary corporations back on Earth. Sarah's built us a foundation. Now we build a fortress. I want every single document analyzed, every witness statement verified, every legal precedent researched. But Zexatheta's team hadn't been idle. They had brought in reinforcements too. 300 lawyers from across the galaxy, including a team of Nexari legal philosophers whose species had invented half of galactic law. The next court session was a battlefield. Your Honor, Thux began, we move for dismissal. The prosecution has no right to convert a civil case to criminal. Moreover, They demand a jury trial, which is not recognized in galactic law for corporate cases. Morrison stood. Your Honor, under the expanded interpretation of Section 7, which you've already accepted, Earth legal procedures apply. The right to jury trial is fundamental to Earth law. A jury of whose peers? Thux demanded. The defendants? That would be other corporate executives. The victims? That would be only Luminari. This is why galactic law uses judges, not juries. Sarah had been waiting for this. She stood up. Your Honor, Earth law has a solution. A jury of one's peers means a representative sample of the community. In this case, the community is the entire Galactic Council. We request a jury drawn from every member species. Judge Kazet's energy form flickered. Every species? That would be over 300 different beings. We'll accept a representative sample, Sarah said. One juror from each of the 30 most populous species. This is insane, Thux shouted. Different species have different values, different concepts of justice. Exactly, Sarah said, which means the verdict will represent true galactic justice, not just the values of the powerful few. The judge was quiet for a long moment. I'll allow it. Jury selection begins tomorrow. Jury selection was unlike anything the Galactic Court had seen. Each potential juror was questioned not just about their knowledge of the case, but about their species' history with Korvath, their understanding of contract law, their views on corporate responsibility. Sarah and her team used every trick in Earth's jury selection playbook. They looked for body language or whatever equivalent each species had. They noted which jurors showed sympathy when the Luminari victims were mentioned. They avoided those who seemed impressed by Korvath's power. Zexatheta watched it all from his seat, his red eyes never leaving Sarah. He had been released on bail, but with restrictions. He couldn't leave the station, couldn't access Korvath's accounts, couldn't communicate with anyone outside his legal team. But he had made one crucial mistake. He had demanded the right to testify in his own defense. His ego wouldn't let him stay silent. The trial proper began 3 weeks later. The courtroom had been reconfigured to accommodate the 30 jurors. Each had their own environmental bubble, allowing them to exist comfortably while observing the proceedings. Morrison gave the opening statement. He didn't just present facts, he told a story. The story of the Luminari, who had welcomed Korvath with open arms. The story of trust betrayed, of contracts written to deceive, of a systematic plan to destroy an entire species for profit. This isn't just about the Luminari, he said. This is about what kind of galaxy we want to live in. One where the powerful can destroy the weak without consequence, or one where justice exists for everyone. Thux's opening was technical, precise. He argued contract law, corporate rights, the danger of allowing emotional arguments to override legal precedent. It was a perfect legal argument. It was also boring. Sarah watched the jurors. The humans on her team had taught her to read faces, even alien ones. The insectoid Zephyrin juror was clicking his mandibles, their species' sign of skepticism. The aquatic Bendari's color was shifting toward purple, indicating anger. Thux was losing them. The prosecution began with their witnesses. One by one, Luminari took the stand. They told their stories through tears of liquid crystal. Children spoke about watching their parents waste away in the machines. Elders spoke about their world's transformation from paradise to industrial wasteland. But it was Bright Echo's testimony that changed everything. I was one of the translators, Bright Echo said. Korvath hired me to help with the contracts. I thought I was helping my people communicate with the galaxy. But they gave me a special translation device. They said it was more accurate. I didn't know it was changing my words. Sarah approached with a datapad. Can you give us an example? Yes. When I translated temporary employment, the device changed it to eternal servitude in Galactic Standard. When I said with compensation, it became with minimal survival allowance. But in Luminari, I was saying the correct words. My people heard one thing while signing another. The courtroom was silent. Even some of Zextheta's lawyers looked uncomfortable. Sarah presented the translation device, recovered from Korvath's offices. Your Honor, we've had this analyzed. It's specifically programmed to mistranslate in ways that benefit Korvath. It's fraud on a massive scale. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Zexatheta took the stand. He sat there, all four arms folded, radiating confidence. Thux began with easy questions, allowing Zexatheta to present himself as a successful businessman who had brought prosperity to dozens of worlds. Then, Sarah stood up for cross-examination. "Mr. Zexatheta," she began, "you've run Korvath for 300 years? 307, he corrected proudly. "And in that time, how many species have you employed?" "Dozens. We've brought economic opportunity across the galaxy." Sarah pulled up a holographic display. "Let's go through them. The Thrakari. You employed them for 40 years. Where are they now?" "They chose to relocate after their contract ended." "Relocate? Their planet is a barren wasteland. The species is nearly extinct." She changed the display. "The Benzites, employed for 60 years. Current population?" Zexatheta's jaw tightened. "I don't have those numbers." "I do. 90% decline." "The Urani, the Delphins, the Kronari, all employed by Korvath, all nearly extinct or scattered." She turned to the jury. 37 species in 300 years. Only one pattern. They had something Korvath wanted, and now they're gone. "They were fairly compensated," Zexatheta snapped. "Compensated?" Sarah pulled up another display. "This is the standard Korvath contract, Section 847, subsection J. Can you read it for us?" Zexatheta was silent. "I'll read it," Sarah said. "Upon cessation of employment, all compensation shall be returned to Korvath as payment for training and equipment provided. Like you pay them, then take it all back. That's legal under galactic law." "Legal doesn't make it right," Sarah said. She pulled up the video of Zexatheta discussing Project Harvest. "Is this you?" His red eyes flared. "That was a private conversation." "Is it you?" "Yes." "So you admit to planning to target the Aquari next? To harvest their organs just like you're harvesting the Luminaries' crystals?" Zexatheta stood suddenly, all four arms slamming on the witness stand. "They're inferior species. They exist to serve their betters. That's the natural order of the galaxy." The courtroom erupted. Judge Kist had to use an energy pulse to restore order. Sarah stood calmly. "No further questions, Your Honor." The defense tried to recover. They brought in economic experts who testified about Korvath's contributions to galactic trade. They brought in legal scholars who argued about the sanctity of contracts. They even brought in a few beings who claimed to have benefited from Korvath's employment, but the damage was done. Zexatheta had shown his true face. The mask of the legitimate businessman had slipped, revealing the predator beneath. In her closing argument, Sarah didn't talk about law. She talked about choice. "Every day we make choices," she said. "Small ones, big ones. The choice to help or harm, to build or destroy, to stand up or stay silent." Zexatheta made his choice. For 300 years he chose profit over people. He chose to destroy rather than create. He chose to see other beings as resources to be exploited rather than people to be respected. She turned to the jury. "Now you have a choice. You can choose to say this is acceptable. That power makes right. That the strong can consume the weak. Or you can choose to say no. No more. Not in our galaxy. Not on our watch." Morrison finished for the prosecution. "Earth has a saying, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Today you 30 beings from 30 worlds can bend that arc. You can make justice more than just a word in our laws. You can make it real." The jury deliberated for 6 days. 6 days where Sarah didn't sleep, didn't eat, just waited. 6 days where protest grew outside the courthouse, with beings from hundreds of worlds demanding justice. 6 days where Zexatheta sat in his quarters for the first time in 3 centuries, afraid. The jury filed back into the courtroom. 30 beings from 30 worlds, each carrying the weight of a historic decision. Sarah noticed that the Valorian juror, one of Zexatheta's own species, wouldn't look at the defendant. Judge Kezet's energy form pulsed slowly. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The jury foreperson, a crystalline Altarian, stood. "We have, Your Honor." On the charge of conspiracy to commit genocide, how do you find? Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom like a thunderclap. Zex Theta's red eyes went wide. On the charge of slavery? Guilty. On the charge of crimes against sapience? Guilty. On the corporate charges of fraud, breach of contract, and systematic exploitation? Guilty on all counts. The courtroom exploded. Some beings cheered, others sat in shocked silence. Zex Theta stood, all forearms shaking with rage. This is impossible, he roared. I am Zex Theta the Eternal. I have ruled commerce for 3 centuries. You cannot judge me. But Judge Kazit wasn't finished. The jury has also made a recommendation for sentencing and systemic change. Foreperson, please continue. The Altarian's crystalline form chimed as they spoke. We, the jury, recommend not just punishment for Zex Theta, but fundamental changes to galactic law. We recommend the adoption of what we're calling the Chen reforms. Sarah's breath caught. They were naming the reforms after her? The foreperson continued. First, the establishment of universal rights for all sapient beings, regardless of their economic or technological development. Second, the creation of transparency requirements for all interspecies contracts. Third, the establishment of regulatory bodies with real power to investigate and prosecute corporate crimes. Fourth, the right to collective action and class representation for all species. Fifth, the requirement that corporate entities be held responsible for the well-being of their employees, not just their productivity. Judge Kazit turned to Sarah. Ms. Chen, as the lead prosecutor, do you have any statement before sentencing? Sarah stood. She had prepared remarks, but looking at Zex Theta's furious face, at Bright Echo's hopeful expression, at the hundreds of beings in the gallery, she spoke from her heart instead. Your Honor, for 300 years, Zex Theta believed he was untouchable. He believed that power and wealth placed him above justice. But justice isn't about power. It's about truth. It's about recognizing that every being, no matter how small, how weak, how different, has inherent worth. She turned to address the gallery. This case was never just about the Luminari. It was about whether we, as a galactic community, will allow the powerful to prey on the vulnerable. Today, 30 jurors from 30 worlds said no. They said that profit doesn't justify suffering. They said that contracts signed under duress aren't valid. They said that every species, every being matters. She looked back at Zex Theta. You called humans naive for believing in right and wrong. But it's not naivety. It's choice. We choose to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. We choose to fight for those who can't fight for themselves. We choose justice even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, even when the entire galaxy tells us it's impossible. Judge Kazit's form shifted to a deep purple, the color of final judgment. Zex Theta of Valoria, you are sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of release. Your personal assets are forfeit, to be distributed among your victims. Korvath Mining Conglomerate is dissolved, its assets to be managed by a trust for the rehabilitation of affected worlds. Security moved to take Zex Theta away. He struggled against them, his red eyes fixed on Sarah. You've destroyed everything. Centuries of work. No, Sarah said quietly. You destroyed everything. I just held up a mirror. As Zex Theta was dragged from the courtroom, Judge Kazit addressed the gallery. The jury's recommendations will be forwarded to the Galactic Council with this court's full endorsement. Court is adjourned. The aftermath was swift and far-reaching. Within days, the Galactic Council voted to adopt the Chen reforms. It was the fastest major legal change in galactic history. Species that had been exploited for generations suddenly had recourse. Corporations across the galaxy scrambled to revise their practices. Sarah stood in her small room, packing her single suitcase. She was going home. Earth had offered her any position she wanted. Supreme Court Justice, Attorney General, head of the new Interspecies Justice Division. She had turned them all down. A knock at her door interrupted her packing. It was Bright Echo, along with dozens of other Luminari. Their crystals were glowing in harmony, creating a beautiful, shifting pattern of light. We wanted to thank you, Bright Echo said. You gave us our world back. Our freedom. Our future. You don't need to thank me, Sarah said. You deserve justice. I just helped you get it. What will you do now? Bright Echo asked. Sarah smiled. I'm going back to my small office above the noodle shop in New Mumbai. There are a lot of small cases that need attention. A merchant cheated by a supplier. a colonist with a faulty ship. They might not be galaxy-changing cases, but they matter to the people involved. That's all. After all this? Well, Sarah said, pulling out her datapad, I did get an interesting message yesterday. Apparently, the Galactic Council itself has been engaging in some questionable practices regarding non-spacefaring species. Something about harvesting resources from planets with pre-sapient life, claiming they don't qualify for protection. Bright Echo's crystals flickered with what Sarah had learned was amusement. You're taking on the Galactic Council? Someone has to, and I've gotten pretty good at impossible cases. Morrison appeared in the doorway. Sarah, the Earth delegation is ready to leave. You sure you don't want to take the government position? You'd have resources, teams, real power. I have everything I need, Sarah said, patting her datapad. Besides, I work better as an underdog. The moment I become part of the system is the moment I stop being able to fight it. As the Earth delegation's ship departed Centaurus Station, Sarah watched the structure grow smaller through the window. She had arrived here with nothing but a suitcase and an impossible case. She was leaving with the same suitcase, but everything else had changed. The galaxy had learned something about humans. They had learned that humans didn't need superior technology or ancient wisdom or telepathic powers to win. They had creativity, stubbornness, and an unshakable belief that things could be better. 6 months later, Sarah stood before the Galactic Council itself. Behind her were representatives from 40 non-spacefaring species who had been granted emergency protective status. Beside her was Marcus, upgraded with new hardware paid for by grateful clients. Across from her was the Council's legal team, 1,000 strong. The lead counselor, an ancient being from one of the founding species, looked at her with something between amusement and annoyance. Ms. Chen, you're suggesting that the Galactic Council, the supreme authority in known space, is subject to laws? I'm saying, Sarah replied, pouring herself a cup of coffee from the thermos she'd brought, that if the Council wants to claim moral authority, it needs to follow its own rules. And those rules, thanks to the Chen reforms that you all voted for, say that all sapient beings have rights. Pre-spacefaring doesn't mean non-sapient. This is ridiculous. You're one human with a broken AI and a coffee addiction. Sarah smiled. That's what Zexa Theta thought too. How did that work out for him? She pulled up her first piece of evidence, a recording from a council mining operation on a world with Bronze Age civilization. Shall we begin? The council members looked at each other nervously. They had created a monster, not Sarah Chen herself, but the idea she represented. The idea that anyone, no matter how small, could stand up to anyone, no matter how powerful, and win. It was a very human idea. And it was spreading. Back on Earth, in law schools from Mumbai to Mars, students studied the Korvath case. They learned about discovery, about jury selection, about the power of story and law. But most importantly, they learned the lesson Sarah Chen had taught the galaxy. Justice isn't about having power. It's about using whatever power you have to protect those who have none. The name for this new generation of lawyers spread across human space and beyond. They were called Chen's Champions, though Sarah herself hated the title. They took on impossible cases, fought unwinnable fights, and slowly, case by case, made the galaxy a little more just. And in her small office above the noodle shop, Sarah Chen kept working. The impossible case against the Galactic Council. She won that too. But by then she was already working on the next one, because there was always a next one, always someone who needed help. Always a fight worth fighting. That was the human way. Not to conquer the galaxy with ships or weapons, but with ideas. Ideas like justice, equality, and the radical notion that everyone, everywhere, deserved a chance to be heard. The galaxy had learned to fear human warriors and respect human traitors. But it was human lawyers they truly came to rely on, because when you had lost everything, when the powerful had taken all you had, when the law itself seemed turned against you, you could always find a human lawyer willing to take your case, even if it was impossible. Especially if it was impossible. Because humans, as the galaxy had learned, didn't believe in impossible. They believed in justice, and that more than any weapon changed everything.